This happened about a year ago when I was traveling through a small town for work. I've always had a strange fascination with abandoned places. Whenever I found an old factory, a forgotten school, or an empty building, I felt compelled to explore it. Most of the time, nothing interesting happened. But this place was different. I first heard about the hospital from a cashier at a gas station. While paying for a drink, I noticed a photograph of an old building hanging on the wall. I asked him what it was. "Old County Hospital," he said. "Been abandoned for years." Then he added something that caught my attention. "People still go there sometimes." I asked why. He shrugged. "Most of them don't stay very long." That was enough to make me curious. Later that afternoon, I drove out to see it. The hospital stood alone on a hill overlooking the town. It was massive, 5 stories tall, hundreds of dark windows. From a distance, it looked abandoned. Up close, it felt dead. The parking lot was cracked and covered in weeds. The entrance doors were missing entirely. Only broken glass remained. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped inside. The lobby was silent. Dust covered everything. Old wheelchairs sat abandoned near the reception desk. Paint peeled from the walls. The entire building smelled damp and rotten. I started exploring. For nearly 30 minutes, everything seemed normal. Empty patient rooms, dark hallways, broken equipment. Nothing unusual. Then I found something strange. A plastic water bottle sitting on a windowsill. At first, I ignored it. But after a few steps, I stopped. Something felt wrong. I turned around and looked again. The bottle wasn't dusty. Everything else in the room was. The floor, the bed, the walls. The bottle looked almost new. I picked it up. There was still water inside. Someone had been here recently. Very recently. The thought made me uneasy. Still, I convinced myself there was a reasonable explanation. Maybe another explorer. Maybe a homeless person. I continued deeper into the building. A few minutes later, I found another room. This time there was no doubt. Someone was living here. A blanket lay folded in the corner. Several empty food cans sat nearby. A flashlight rested on a chair. And there was a backpack leaning against the wall. Everything looked organized, as if the owner had only stepped away for a moment. I suddenly felt uncomfortable. The hospital wasn't empty, and whoever lived here probably didn't want visitors. I decided to leave, but before I could turn around, I heard a sound, a footstep, somewhere above me. I froze. Another step, slow, heavy, deliberate. Someone was on the floor above. For several seconds, I stood completely still. Listening, the footsteps continued, then stopped. The silence that followed felt even worse. I switched off my flashlight and waited. Nothing happened. Eventually, I turned the light back on. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Fresh footprints. In the dust. Leading into the hallway. I was certain they hadn't been there before. Someone had been nearby. Very nearby. I suddenly felt watched. I started walking toward the stairs, trying not to panic. The building seemed darker now. Every hallway looked the same. Every shadow felt wrong. As I reached the next floor, I noticed a door slightly open at the end of the corridor. A faint light glowed inside. Not sunlight. A flashlight. Someone was in there. I don't know why I walked closer. Curiosity, I guess. I approached the doorway and carefully looked inside. The room appeared empty, but someone had clearly been living there. There were blankets, bottles, food, a portable radio, and something hanging on the wall. Photographs. Dozens of photographs. I stepped inside for a better look. The pictures showed different parts of the hospital. Hallways, rooms, staircases. Then I noticed something disturbing. Many of the photographs contained people, visitors, explorers, people wandering through the building. Some of them looked completely unaware they were being photographed. My heart started racing. Someone had been secretly watching everyone who entered this place. Then I saw the photo that made me want to run. A picture of me, standing outside the hospital, taken earlier that day, before I had entered. Before I had even reached the front door, someone had been watching me from the moment I arrived. A loud noise suddenly echoed from somewhere behind me. I spun around. The hallway outside was empty, but I knew I wasn't alone. I grabbed my flashlight and hurried toward the stairs. Then I heard footsteps again, this time much closer, fast, moving toward me. I didn't wait to see who it was. I ran. The sound followed, heavy footsteps pounding through the corridor. Every second they seemed closer. I raced down the stairs as fast as I could. My heart hammered in my chest. The footsteps continued behind me. I reached the lobby and sprinted toward the exit. Sunlight flooded through the broken entrance. I burst outside and ran across the parking lot. Only when I reached my car did I dare look back. The hospital stood motionless, silent, dark. For a moment, I thought maybe I had imagined everything. Then I saw a figure standing in a fourth-floor window, watching me. The person didn't move, didn't wave, didn't step away. They simply stood there, staring. I got into my car and left immediately. I've explored many abandoned places since then. Factories, schools, hotels, and even prisons. But I've never gone back to that hospital. Because one thing still bothers me. The photograph. Someone took that picture before I entered the building, which means they were already watching, waiting. And if I had stayed inside just a few minutes longer, I don't think I'd be telling this story today. This happened during a business trip a few years ago. After driving for nearly 6 hours, I arrived in a small town just after midnight. I was exhausted and just wanted a place to sleep. The only hotel with vacancies was an old 3-story building near the edge of town. The lobby was quiet. An older man sat behind the front desk watching a small television. He barely looked at me when I walked in. I asked for a room. Without saying much, he handed me a key. Room 317. I thanked him and headed upstairs. The third floor felt strangely empty. The hallway stretched farther than I expected, and most of the lights were dim. Room 317 sat at the very end. The room itself looked completely normal. There was a bed, a desk, a television, and a small lamp near the window. I locked the door, set my bag down, and went to sleep. Sometime during the night, I woke up to a ringing phone. The sound seemed unusually loud in the silent room. Still half asleep, I picked up the receiver. Hello? No answer. Just silence. After a few seconds, the line disconnected. I stared at the phone for a moment before placing it back down. I assumed someone had dialed the wrong room. About an hour later, I woke up again. This time it wasn't the phone. It was knocking. 3 slow knocks on the door. Knock, knock, knock. I checked the clock. 3:12 a.m. My first thought was that another guest had the wrong room. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty, no movement, no people, nothing. I opened the door anyway. The corridor was completely silent. A cold draft moved through the hallway. For some reason, I suddenly felt uncomfortable. I quickly closed the door and locked it. The next morning, I packed my things and went downstairs. The same man was sitting behind the reception desk. I placed the key on the counter. Checking out. Room 317. The man frowned. Room what? 317. For a moment, he simply stared at me. Then he slowly shook his head. We don't have a room 317. I laughed. You gave me the key yourself. His expression never changed. We only have rooms up to 316. A strange feeling settled in my stomach. The man stood up and asked me to follow him. Together we walked up to the third floor. When we reached the end of the hallway, I stopped. My heart immediately began to race. There was no room 317, no door, no room number, nothing. Only a faded wall. I stared at it in disbelief. That's impossible, the man sighed. There used to be a room here many years ago. What happened to it? There was a fire. According to him, that section of the hotel had been permanently sealed off decades earlier. The room no longer existed. It hadn't existed for years. I reached into my pocket for the key. I wanted to prove he was wrong, but the key was gone. Completely gone. To this day, I still can't explain what happened that night. Maybe I was more tired than I realized. Maybe there's a logical explanation. But I know what I saw. I slept in room 317. I answered its phone. I heard someone knock on its door. And according to everyone at that hotel, room 317 doesn't exist.